Hello, everybody. How you doing out there? I think we're live. I'm not the expert that Mark is in running these things. So give me a comment if you can't hear me.
I can hear you.
Yeah, Shane can hear me. You said you wanted to say hi to everybody. Shane, go ahead.
Yeah, guys. Sorry, it does not let me comment. So I see the people saying hello. I would love to be able to type back, but it just won't let me. So I apologize. Rob knows better than to give me control of any kind of keypad.
Well, I do that, but it won't let me. So anyway, Shane and I had one of these once before. We've been on Mark's show a couple times. So we both keep getting different questions, and some of them are the same question over and over. So we thought we'd do a couple things here. One is we'd address a couple of the questions that that people seem to bring up on a regular basis. And then even if it sounds like we're repeating ourselves, you can just kind of snooze at that, I guess. And then the other ones are things that you guys are bringing up over here in the comment section, or that you want to talk about live. You can bring up a comment. So so one of the ones that I thought I'd bring up, and it seems crazy that I would be talking about this, but we both get questions on this, is this one right here. So I get questions over and over again about pre-coat techniques. And as you know, in Shane and mine videos, when we teach it, the latest methodology we teach is that we actually cut a clear pocket that we lay everything into. And the reason we do that, as we've said before, is one, and this is, everybody understands this one, the bleeding part of the colored epoxy getting out into the fibers of the wood. That's one. But the other one that people miss often is the fact that by having that layer of pre-coat there in a good way, it helps with the bubble generation, the micro bubbles you get over time in popping them. So the common feedback we got is, come on, can't we just, we know people that use varnish. We know people that use shellac. We know people that just pre-coat a resin on it. There's all kinds of feedback from people that sit there and want to say, we know this works, and this works. What do you think?
Good, use it.
Yeah. So our answer is always, do whatever you want. You're asking, if you ask us, we'll tell you what works best for us with all the experimentation we've done. And usually I will default to what Shane has told me. And usually I've already experienced a pain or two, and I've called him and asked him, what do you do about this? And he does it. So on the pre-coat techniques, I just wanted to clarify that that's the story. So if you want to ask about pre-coating, go ahead and ask during the session. That's fine. But no, the answer is pretty much just, it's what we do. It's what we think works best based on what we actually use. Did you want to add anything there, Shane?
Nope, that's exactly right.
All right. So the other common one that we get is, what do you recommend for epoxy? And so Shane has said over and over again that he uses moss, and you can see his moss shirt there as the epoxy. And you know that I switched to moss epoxy, and there's all kinds of epoxy out there. There are a ton of different brands, and I've used Upstart in the past. I use super clear epoxy for my river charcuterie type boards or deeper boards, and so there's all kinds of epoxy out there, and everybody wants to talk about, well, what about this epoxy and what about that epoxy? And the only thing that we wanted to get on so that we don't have to repeat it a bunch of times is, moss is expensive. People recognize that. And the reason that we use moss is because of how it works for us. Well, that's the reason I use it. Shane uses it because he gets it free.
The low viscosity is what caused me to really love getting that free.
Yeah. So the low viscosity helps in what way, Shane? Go ahead and emphasize that again.
I mean, it just reduces bubbles right there. So now I can do one pre-coat, or if I'm doing walnut or something dark, no pre-coats, and just go straight to the pour. So even though I like doing the pre-coat at a point, cut out the pocket, fill it with clear 0.15 deep, and then do all the rest of my cuts at 0.125. That's my preferred way I like to do it. There is times where I'm just in a hurry, or maybe I'm getting a servicing on the machine. I've got to schedule things in. So I just kind of rush things along. And that makes it a lot easier with this epoxy.
So that's a great segue. And I don't have a banner to put up there, Shane, but one of the other questions that people come at me every once in a while, and when I say come at me, I don't mean in a negative term. I mean, they ask a question. Hey, Rob, when I'm on a show at Mark's or something, they'll say, hey, I noticed Shane didn't actually put a clear coat pocket there. What's going on? Did he change his mind? Does he not do that anymore?
Well, so was that the USMC thing?
I think it was the USMC one. But give him some thoughts. Give some thoughts about when you make those decisions and what you're thinking about, because that helps people make decisions.
Yeah. So I'd have to look at the video for the USMC one to see what I did. But a lot of times if I'm doing wall art, I actually will do the pocket bigger than the profile at the end.
Okay, I'll put the USMC on one right now.
Okay.
All right, let's put that up. Maybe it's not showing the pre-coat.
I can tell you one. Yeah, that's a white. That was a white with not a lot of liquid, mostly like icicle and the Tanyu white. So and the wood I was using, I just knew I didn't have to worry about bleed.
Okay.
It was going to be a 1/2-inch wood border for a piece of wall art, so I didn't worry about the pre-coat on that.
All right. So because I put that video up, we can put it up there again real quick. There's a question in this stream, so it'll get recorded. You can't watch it, by Rob Schuster. And it says, hey guys, I'll be at the airport. Mr. Show, I saw one of Shane's projects. The text for USMC had a black text with light swirl. How did you do that? So let me show that video again, and I'll try to stop on that part. It's early on, so that we can show what he's talking about, and everybody knows what he's talking about. I'm always on the move. If you get So right in here, if you look at this text, I think that's what Rob's talking about. You see this marbling technique, and it
probably looks black, but it's just silver.
Yeah. So let me go through the rest of it.
Pause it there.
All right. So how do you go about doing something like that, Shane?
So that's the black diamond and the Sanyu, I think it's Sanyu white from Eye Candy mixed together. And then that one there, I can just tell by how it's a little bit darker. It had a few drops of black #1 Mix-All. But not much. I mean, the more liquid you put in it, the less swirl you're going to get in your final product.
Yeah, so that was gonna be one of our further questions down the road. Is swirl is one that people are interested in, and I think I've got a video here in a few minutes. We'll get back to swirl, but the mixture of the colors, making sure that one's not predominant over the other, unless you're trying to enhance that color, is what's critical, right?
Yep.
So when you're thinking about swirl, what are you thinking about?
Keep it to the powders and not much liquid at all if I want to swirl. I got shit to do, yeah, I'm always on the move. If you get in my way, you'll catch a 1 and 2.
So all of those lines now, you see the lines in here, the border lines and Semper Fidelis and all that. What are you using there? Just straight liquid black, right?
Yep. #1 Mix-All black. No powdered pigment at all.
Okay.
Vision mood to the top.
All right, let's
And
take
there was a mix all 10 red for the heart.
or mix all 10 red. Okay. That was the other question is I commonly get questions, what types of pigments do you use? And then we get into discussions. Well, can you use acrylic paints or some other cheaper method? Because Mixol is so expensive, or Epoxy or eye candy, all those are expensive. And my answer is usually you can use whatever you want, and it may or may not work. And I haven't tried all those things, but what I do is I try the ones I know are going to work. What are your thoughts about that, Shane?
Yeah, I feel pretty confident that with whatever products I'm given, I can knock out a pretty killer inlay. But I use the stuff I use because of the final result. Like, it's just the eye candy powders. I mean, they might be just the same powders. Maybe it's just in my head. I don't know. But like, to me, I get like the best swirl with those powders. Black Diamond, I've tried it before and it was okay, but I guess I just didn't like the final result, so I just moved on from that. But that does not mean that Black Diamond's bad. I'm sure they're great. I wouldn't be surprised if it's like gasoline. There's one big plant making it all, and they put different people's names on it. So who knows?
Yeah, I actually use a couple Black Diamonds that I think are pretty awesome. Let me see here real quick. So like you said, it just depends, right? This one has become one of my favorites. Let's see if we can see it on the camera. It says mahogany. Can you see that?
Yep.
So that one is the one that I used, Shane, on that 8-foot charcuterie board to fill in those knot holes.
Yep.
That blended real well. You remember that?
Yeah.
And so that mahogany looks a lot like walnut, actually, and it turns out pretty nice. So like you said, just depends on which one you're trying to get a hold of and work with, right?
Yep.
All right, and then let's see if there's any comments in here on pigments or anything else. I need to get Mark's skill at looking at these things. Here's one that says, when using eye candy powders as epoxy tinted with Mixol, the pearlescent effect goes muted. How heavy are you with your mica powder, Shane?
Heavy and light with the tint, light with the liquid. If I want to see swirl, I'm really light with the liquid. There's extra powder in there.
Okay. And since we're talking about powders, let's go down here to Rick Schultz. He says, I struggle with colors. Is there any chart or guide out there? This gets brought up. Yeah. It's such a frustrating thing for those of us that don't have your natural eye. Although Jim Matthews seems to be, I don't know if you've seen some of Jim's stuff lately, Shane, but he does a lot of the cartoons and stuff. Man, he really is doing pretty well.
Yeah.
But most of us struggle with these colors, and you've tried to provide some insight before. Why don't you just repeat that? Or
I mean, I would love to. I just I can't explain why I've always been able to just take the primaries and some black and white and look at something and repeat the color. I don't really know why. Like, I've just always done it since before I can remember. Art class and all that kind of stuff. I went to the Minnesota school. Like, it was all just something I didn't really ever think about. And I couldn't even tell you, hey, you need, well, I guess I could tell you what colors to put in, but the shades and things like that are where it comes really key. When you're mixing, like, Mixol, they have, 100 and something different colors. So instead of just using just the primaries with white and black, it's really nice to be able to grab something that's close, but then knowing what shade of something to put, you'd be amazed. Like, oh, I need a baby blue in this. And it sounds crazy, but when you mix it together, it's perfect. So for some reason, I'm able to like see the colors inside, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. So actually that makes sense. I was going to say, when you said you can't really say what you're going to mix, I know that's not true, because whenever I'm trying to do a board and I can't figure out what color to use, I usually call you and you say, well, mix all this, take eye candy this, and mix them together.
Yeah.
So you can do that.
Adding, always start with just a drop and just keep bringing it up like a drop or a half a drop at a time.
Yeah. And so here's something that here's something right here that Brooks Martin is bringing up. And what do you think about this? Brooks says he likes to test on a paper plate, mix them up on a paper plate and kind of see what it looks like. That makes sense to me.
I'm sure that would work, but I hate painting. So that would just make me think I'm about to paint something, and I I wouldn't want to do it.
All right. So let's see if there's anything else on pigment.
That sounds like a great method, though.
Yeah, it does sound like something that would work, huh?
Yeah, and then you just got to eyeball it to just understand it's going to dry later after it's been mixed in epoxy, and then it sets a little bit later.
So now the other thing that people ask about, and some of these people are new, Shane, so it's worth repeating, is how do you go about making your skin tones? There's some base colors you start with, and then you work from there. So
right. So I used to start just doing it with primaries, like orange, yellow, and adding whatever I needed to get to where I needed to go. But now Mixol has, you know what? Let me grab the colors. Hold on one second.
Okay.
Okay, Rob, I'm just going to send you this really quick so you'll have it right now, and then you can just pop it up there.
All right. And then what I can do is I can actually, I'll put a link to the color in the comment section.
Yeah. And I can't remember if I have a code for Mixol or not. I'm the worst about that.
Well, let me know if you have a code for Mixol and I can put it in there if you have it.
Yeah, I don't think they were able to set something up like that yet. I think they needed to find a local dealer that wanted to let me use theirs or something like that. So I just kind of gave up on it.
Well, yeah, I know you do for Moss and I do for Moss, so I can put both of our codes in there for Moss.
Okay.
I don't know I don't have one for Mixol either. So you sent that to me. Let's see what it says. I'm not sure that I'll be able to actually get that in there, Shane, right now. So why don't you just go ahead?
Well, here, I think I can probably show it at the camera, and then you guys can. Rob, can you just kind of say what numbers you see here? If you can see them, hold on a second.
Well, I pulled it up on my screen here. It says Mixol 1, 3, 6, 9, and 10. Let's see if I can show
and
that.
25.
Yeah, let me see if I can show that screen. Hold on.
Okay.
So that people can see what we're talking about. One of these days I'll be as good as Mark Lindsay when it comes to showing these things. Share screen.
He's good at that. I'd like to get back on with him sometime if he does any kind of epoxy stuff.
All right, so let's see what we're seeing on the screen. Wrong screen.
I'm looking at you, looking at me, looking at you, looking at me.
Yeah, I shared the wrong screen, obviously, because I shared the screen we're on. And I thought I was sharing a different screen. Because the picture went away. Try this again. All right, we'll try this one more time. Sorry, folks. Trying to get this up. Technical difficulties here.
Rich Schultz, if you scroll way back on
my, all right. So there you go. Go ahead. Talk to Rick.
I was just saying, Rich, I was just telling him that if you scroll way back to my Instagram somewhere, you'll see it there for sure, like the original video. I think that's the one that kind of shows it from the beginning all the way through. But I can't remember when I even did that one. I think it would be a ways back.
All right. So here's can you see it? Can you see on the screen there, Shane? We've got your
yeah. That's it.
So what do you want to tell them about this? Go ahead.
So, you know, the
We
one
were
that's
talking about
missing,
flesh tones.
there's one that's missing there. Number 10 red.
Okay.
So just remember to tell everybody also 10 red is needed. But if you have those colors by adding the 3 and the 19 with just the primaries and the black and white, skin tones just fly at you. Like those are the two colors right there that really help with skin tones.
3 and 19, you said?
Mm-hmm.
And you said primary colors. What else do you add? 3
So
19?
yellow and red, because you're looking to add orange. So I'd add some yellow and red.
Okay.
But, you know, they have an orange too, so you could just use orange. I like to make it myself because I feel like I'm making it correct and no one else can. So it's just a narcissistic attitude, I think.
Okay, good. All right, let's look at some other questions here. Let's see here. So here's one from Brooks Martin. Can you read that? He says, has anyone tried to bury a pore under another pore to expose a hideous vein under a flesh pore?
I have not done that. I would. Is he talking about like a translucent where you put it up against light and you're able to see that in there, or just have it look translucent? Because I would just shade myself a translucent vein where it looked like you were looking in there at it.
Okay.
But I think what he's talking about sounds really cool.
Well, I'm going to have to watch what he does. Brooks is real good about follow-up, but there's like a 30-second follow-up. So I'll check again here in a second.
And I want to see that final deal. That sounds like it's going to be awesome.
Let's see here. Do you see Glenn's
oh, Glenn's naked.
So this is another common question is how long do you really have to wait and what's the cure time? And that also relates to the Moss, why you like the Moss LV and the MEdium Hardener. So why don't you go into that?
With the fast, there's no other epoxy I've ever tried, and I've tried several. And the Moss, I can get 3 colors in a day. So I do one in the morning, one later afternoon, and one in the evening, as long as I have the time. So it's usually only like a 5 or 10 minute cut, and 10 minutes on the pour plus just checking on it. So there's not even that much time invested in it, and I'm able to get 3 colors in a day. I do 2 all the time, so everything is way sped up for me now, being able to use Moss. Those other ones, those 1-to-1s, they're great, but I'm waiting. Even when I only wait 24 hours, I've just got the fuzzies. Even if I have one of the brand new bits like Glenn sent me, I put one on just the other day to do these boards here that are sitting next to me, and it wasn't the bit. The bit was perfectly sharp. I mean, they're great. It was just that the epoxy hadn't fully cured yet. So it was like, okay, so I had to run the path again at a faster speed because I knew it wouldn't break a bit that way, but to kind of get the extra off. So Moss, the medium, you can get 2 a day with the medium. You don't even need to use the fast to get 2 a day.
Okay. Which you brought up another thing there, Shane, that I get talked a lot about. So, folks, people ask me all the time, and they also ask Shane and others, what bits do we use? And I've done 1 or 2 videos on that. But, you can use whatever brand or whatever you want to use. But let's talk about the actual bits we normally use. We both use 15%, and I would say 90% of the time, and I think that's what Shane said before. I'll let you get into that, Shane. So our common bits are 15 and 30, and then, of course, 60 on rare occasions. But 15 and 30 are the ones we use most of the time. We happen to use Rip Precision Tools bits, usually because the prices that Rip has are cheaper than everybody else's. Are they better bits? I won't say whether they're better, not better. They're good bits. They work. They like every other 15-degree bit, you're going to have to replace them every once in a while because those tips are brittle. Same thing with the 30, but more with the 15. But I can get a rip bit for about half the cost to 30% of the cost I can for several other manufacturers out there. And so Rip Precision Tools, Glenn, has been really good to me. And so that's the one I use on a regular basis. And I got turned on to those by Shane and another guy named Andy Johnson, who does a lot of wooden inlays. So that's my input from my perspective. Shane, why don't you share yours?
Well, it's real similar. I mean, like 90% of the time I'm using Glenn's bits. The only bits I buy are from Glenn, and then from like Tools Today, the Amana bits. And that's just because they have some sizes, some bigger sizes that I need, and they work great. So I don't buy that white head or white stand or whatever that one is on Amazon. They're probably fine, but I can tell you that they're not going to spec out like how Glenn's do and how Amana bits do, because I mean there's a real precision. And I noticed when I tried to use a cheap bit, you know, I'm having to run the program again with a better bit because it missed by just enough to leave, you know, stragglers everywhere, and it's just a nightmare. So they're not the same size as, you know, that they're supposed to be. They can get away with way too much as far as I'm concerned. So when you use RIP or you use the Amana bits, those things are, you know, and I'm sure, what is it, Freud? Yeah, Freud. I'm sure those are probably great too. I'm not saying they're off. I'm just telling you, I've tried some before that were the Chinese bits. You know, they maybe can build a really good cold, but they're not too good at bits because those things are always off. Quarter inch. I mean, they have no idea what a quarter inch means.
Yeah. So yeah. I haven't had much problem with that, but the biggest problem I have, the big thing that I go with is if it's a bit that'll work good, and I can get it for a reasonable price, and that's why I tend to go towards Glenn's bits or Rip Precision Tools. And but I do use other bits like bits and bits and other ones when it comes to certain bits that Glenn doesn't have, or there's some specialties. So for example, you know, like a keyhole bit or a certain type of roundover. We have point roundovers on Rip Precision Tools, but if I want to use a plunge roundover, a little different type of roundover, I'll go to some other bit. So it just depends on what I'm getting. So so anyway, just those are interesting things, but that's one we get, and we talked about a bit. So here's one here that Jim says, thanks for the shout out, but I bug Shane a lot on IG, and he provides a lot of guidance, and he wanted to really say thanks. Shane, for
very welcome, Jim. I'm always happy to, you know, when I see them, you know, sometimes it takes me a while to get in there and see them. I love sharing the information. So nothing is secret. I don't charge for it. I want everybody. There's so much room for so many more of us to be doing these kind of inlays that, you know, we should just be promoting it and sharing all the information we get, what works, what doesn't work, get more people involved. Now that will not be the attitude you hear from me on my Instagram account, but that's how I feel.
Yeah, you got a show personality and then a real personality, and I think people get those two mixed up.
Yeah, they think I wouldn't want to share.
He comes off on his Instagram that he's the epoxy god. Well, he doesn't usually back off of that even on his.
I was going to say that's
a fact. But otherwise, he's always willing to help people out. So here's one from Mark Shane. He says, "I've never gotten a definitive answer. Does using a lot of mica powder affect the curing process like using too much liquid tint can?"
Yeah, I've noticed I've accidentally dumped, you know, out of a jar trying to, like, you know, be lazy because I didn't have a popsicle stick near me, and I was doing one of these things trying to get it in there, and a whole big freaking clump fell out into the thing, and then I tried to get some out, but then, you know, I don't want to put epoxy back in the thing, so I just went for it. And yeah, that I even added some more epoxy to it and tried to recover. And I wound up recutting that the next day, like 100th bigger. because it almost, I mean, it cured, but I could still use the back end of like one of the RIP bits, like the shank, and press on it, and it would move. And that was like moss and medium. So, and that was the next day. So there was no way that stuff would be moving.
So on that topic, though, I think people are oversensitive to that personally, Shane. And so I'd like to get your opinion. So you really have to add a whole lot. It's not just,
you should already be using a lot.
It's not just a little bit. It shouldn't interfere with you getting the rich color you want. So the way we talk about doing that, and we've shown in our videos, is we're stirring the popsicle stick, so to speak, and we're pulling it out, and we're looking to see if we can see the stick underneath it, because is it too opaque? If you can see that, and I think people get to the point where they're afraid they're going to add too much because they can still see the stick, so they don't want to add more because they think they've added more than 3% or 2%. To me, I don't get overly concerned about that. I'm more looking at how dark do I want that epoxy, how opaque, I guess I should say, and am I getting the color I want? Because I've never reached the point that I've impacted the cure time. And my impression is you have to really, really go overboard with either the mica or the liquid to impact that cure time. What is your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. It was a lot that I put in there, but does using a lot of mica powder affect the curing? That's how I know it does. Is there is some point there where it affects it? I'm not sure where that's at. I guess I don't push that limit too much, but I use a lot of mica powder. I mean, that's how those colors look so deep and rich. There's got to be a lot. You can't. There's no skimping on those kind of things if you want the piece to really pop at the end.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to bring that out and have a discussion, because you kind of answered that. Jim asked a question earlier. Remember, Shane, how much mica powder do you add with your liquid? And the tendency is you actually usually add a lot more mica powder and just a few drops of liquid.
Yep.
So the liquid is trying to help give a little deeper base when you're doing the swirl and so forth. So if you add too much liquid, you're not going to let the swirl pop out as much. And so you add more mica powder, and to get the opaqueness, you're going to have to add enough to where that's not a problem.
Plus, I don't know how to describe this, but if you just went with only mica powder, sometimes that can make your this is weird. There's something my eye picks up. It can make your swirl look blurry. So, and I think what that is just there's so much clear in there bouncing around off the wood below it and all that stuff that it just kind of makes it look blurry. So I put just enough liquid in there to keep it from being, so easily, clear, because like if you pour epoxy, it's going to clear epoxy. It's going to take on whatever colors it's touching. So add a little bit of liquid to it to kind of get that out, and things to me look more crisp that way than with not enough for the liquid.
So here's one here and I think you talked a little bit about this. Mark got some pigment from somebody.
Where do you get that from? I've never even heard of that.
Flesh tone. So Mark, if you wanted to, I think you might have put a link in one of your videos or something already, but if you in your pirate video or something, but if you wanted to provide that to me via email or something, I can try to put that in here and see how that works. I keep wanting to ask you and look at your videos, and I forget to write it down, and then until it gets brought up again.
Plus, aren't there like 4,000 different shades of people? So, like, what a brilliant marketing thing to come out with flesh tones. It's like unlimited. I mean, what flesh tone? Was he doing African American, or what was the flesh tone? I'm curious.
It was the pirate. So down here it says, Shane, did you see the Pirate Project?
I'll look again and see. So
I know I did. So
was it like yeah, because it was like a I don't want to say red or peachy because it wasn't like overly done. It did look just like flesh.
Yeah,
it
was
the color,
the
right?
Black hat and the patch over his eye and stuff. You remember?
Yeah. Yeah. What brand was that? Can you put that up?
Let's see if he puts it down here.
Because having that tone right there, you can go from your rednecks to whatever you want to do. with just adding a few drops of, whatever. So that.
So Mark put this note in. I'll send you a link as soon as I can find it.
Okay, great.
All right. Let's see here. Let's get back up here. So what is the smallest amount of Moss LV you're comfortable using if adding mix-all tints?
I've never used less than 1 pump of each. So, Jim, are you using the pumps that they have?
I'll look down here and sees it, but I think everybody that I know of that uses the Moss, I did the video on the weight pours, and because that's how you and I talked about it when I first got started. And that was before we had pumps. So once we got pumps, I stopped.
I saw Jim's response. He said he does not have the pumps. Okay, yeah, they're great. Like it makes it so simple. It already breaks down too. So the pump with the red dot is going to give you, a half of the amount per pump that the pump with the blue dot is for your resin, and those go right onto the bottle, and that's it. So I never use less than that. If you want, why don't I just do a pump of each and see what it measures out to, and that way I could let everybody know. So that's
I can put that in there later. There's a bunch of questions, so I want to get through these.
Okay.
So here's another one, and I'll let you answer. I've got my answer, but go ahead.
What does that mean, double vector lines? Remember, I'm kind of ignorant when it comes to that stuff.
No, so what he's talking about here, tell me if I'm wrong here, Byron. He's talking about the overlap stuff. So, yes, we still use overlap. Overlap is critical. Yeah. And so yes, that means like if you have a vector, you'll have to put another vector just outside of it or just inside of it of a color.
Or I just usually copy, paste, then click it, and then add to new layer, and then call it, whatever color that one's going to be. And then you can just turn one off and one on and go, they're right on top of one another. So you can just pull the parts you need. Because sometimes the whole vector doesn't need to be blown out. Sometimes it's just one side or the other, or 75% of it, but the line, coming across another color might not need to be stressed. Or stretched. So I'll usually duplicate all the vectors. And if I see I have 5 colors, sometimes I'll just drop 5 sets of like paste, select all red, paste, select all yellow, paste, select all black, paste, select all white, like that. And then go in and only turn on those vectors, and then just clip and save what I need. Let them all lay on top of each other with different color things, and then I can see what needs to be overlaid, and I play with the node editing then. That probably didn't make any sense, but it was perfectly clear in my head.
I think it did. Here's an example of one that somebody sent us. Rick Schultz actually sent this before, and I've been talking with Rick, and I think he said he had some emails with you where he's talking to you. And so this is actually an Oregon duck. Let me do something here. Get those tool lines off there. So here's an example of the vectors, and I'm not sure how well it's showing up on the screen. But
it looks like it's missing over on his, well, maybe not. Scroll into the left wrist that's lower. Well, I mean, it looks like the duck's left wrist. Well, no, yeah, I'm sorry. So on the right side, yeah.
Over here?
Yeah. Zoom in to the top, like close on the cuff. Okay. Are those touching or are they broken up?
No, they're touching. That's why I said the screen's not coming up.
Oh, okay.
Clear. But here's the point that I wanted to make. Here's an example of where, if I was going to provide some feedback to Rich on this, and Shane did, where you pour these colors. This is like, I wish I had the JPEG up. This is like green, and then the hands are yellow and so forth. And Rich's original pour, he poured the whole black in here. And there's an example, and this outside here is white. And here's an example where if I was doing this and I was giving advice, back to your question, Byron, let's say I click on this, I would actually, let's say this is going to be part of a green sleeve or something like that. And so I wanted to have the black inside here, right? So I would actually do an overlap by using this offset tool here. inwards, and I'd say 0.05, 0.02, or whatever. I'll put 0.02 for kicks. And then you can see now there's the two vectors you're talking about. And in reality, this isn't working well because there's a whole bunch of work that needs to do to make the black work. But so let's say this would outside.
Well, so those lines in the black, they're not touching. Those vectors aren't connected.
Right.
Oh,
so
yeah.
This,
that's what I was saying. Yeah, that'll
So this would be green, let's say, and this black border then would come into here. That would end up being a black. And so it would give you that overlap.
Let me give you a shortcut on that one. Can you pan way back out, like, so you can see the whole thing? So that thing has looks like it has a black border around every color. So
yeah, what he did exactly. He has a black border. He actually poured black first.
Yeah. I was going to say, you don't need an overlap on that because you just pour the whole thing black and then cut those yellow stripes, which are near the wrist, and the green.
Yeah, well, that's what he did at first, and that worked okay. But the other part was what your recommendation was to do all the greens and the yellows, and then pour the black independently, which would mean he would have to change these colors, right?
But I would need to see the picture again. If the picture, if there was no colors touching colors, everything was separated by black, you can just pour a black cast and just cut into that thing one color at a time, and there's no overlap. That's the best, easiest money you can make. Got it.
So anyway, the short answer is yes, you still have to use the double vectors and the overlap.
Yeah, I use it all the time. Yeah, a lot of overlapping.
So here's a question from Glenn. Is the viscosity the same for medium and fast?
Yeah, in fact, you can even, with the great thing about Moss is you can, let's say you use 2 pumps of the LV resin. You could put a pump of, if you wanted medium, you could put a pump of fast and a pump of slow. I don't know that they would create a medium, but I'm telling you, you can actually mix the 3 different hardeners. It doesn't matter as long as it's the correct ratio, and just mix that up really good and it works fine. Like I've used medium with slow before just to kind of check it and see. It did give me a little bit more time and it cured perfectly. Like I didn't notice anything bad with it. It was probably, like 8 pumps of resin and then 4 of each of the other, the one slow and 1 medium, 4 of each of those, and it came up perfect.
So here's Brooks. I think this gets back to his vein. He basically saying, just wondering if I could have lower pour exposed under the top coat pour. And
yeah, but the top coat pour would have to be more see-through. I mean, right.
John, I'm not sure your question is Moss. It's MAS, like on Shane's shirt. If you're asking, we're talking about Moss epoxy. Yes.
Yeah, MAS. That's it.
Here's some feedback.
Yeah. Where is cousin Kevin? I think he's in the other room.
Yeah, don't bring him in. Don't bring him in.
Yeah, I know.
Ken, do you put anything on the wood before using polishing compound? I find that the wood pores take on a slightly gray color. And somebody else above, I think it was Jim, again, somebody asked about polishing. Do you polish your designs? And so I'll let you answer this, and then I can talk about my experience based on your input.
Well, it's really all depends on the type of wood and the grain of the wood and all that kind of stuff on how I actually do it. But yeah, the answer is yes. I many times will sand, from 120 up to about 320. And then I treat the wood with Odie's, let it sit for 24 hours or 48 hours, buff the whole thing out. And then I continue sanding and repeat that process. Like, if I notice that, see what happens, you try to stay on the logo after that point as much as you can. You can still go hit the whole board, but you try to stay on your logo as much as you can. And but if you just try to go, if you're taking all your sanding right to, the 12,000 or whatever it is you guys sand up to, your wood will absolutely get that gray tin. I know exactly what he's talking about. That's why I started. Also, like a sanding sealer will work too. The reason I don't like doing that too much. I even try to get up to like a 400, 600 on what are those pads I'm using?
Merca.
Yeah, I think they're the mesh. I typically try to get up to about 600 there, then treat with Odie's oil. Then I can come back and use 800, and 1,000, and just keep going up from there into the polishes. And I noticed then at the end, buff the board off really good and hit it with Odie's again, and everything is great. It kept any of that gray look out of there. But yeah, that was frustrating. I freaked out when that was a big project that I fucked up or messed up.
So that's one of my experiences too, Ken, is that it actually came, not only Shane was one input, but I watched a couple other videos on polishing your epoxy, and more than one person talks about applying some sort of finish to the wood part as you start to go up in grits and then do the polishing. When you get ready to do the polishing, it will discolor your wood if you don't put some kind of finish. So I use Odie's like Shane talked about, but also the video I was watching, they were using tung oil. So some kind of finish that kind of helps fill in the pores, so that when you're actually using the polishing compound, you don't end up turning your wood a different color.
Like a tung oil, because I mean that's what's in Odie's. So
yeah, it's just a modified tung oil.
Might be good.
Have you guys pigmented with CA to fill micro holes?
Oh no, I never have done that. I always use I just use clear epoxy dabbed on the end of a toothpick, and then if it's going into a there's some holes on like right in the middle of a color, you don't need to even tint it. Just clear epoxy, and that picks up the color perfectly. But then go through the polishing process, and then it's completely hidden. Well, mine is, if you're not using enough pigments and enough liquid, like to make your epoxy like where it's not translucent, would be like see-through, right, Rob?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if your stuff is coming out where it's a little bit translucent, then I can't speak for that. I won't do my colors that way. But if you have enough stuff in there, you're going to be fine.
In my experience is, Brooks, that I have used CA glue, just clear CA glue. I don't pigment it, because here's why I don't pigment it. If I try to pigment it, I'm probably not going to match the original pigment, and it will want to tend out. It tends to want to stand out as a spot or something. If I just use the clear, the spot doesn't seem to show up as much in my case. It just kind of reflects the actual epoxy that the micro holes being filled with. And that sounds similar to what Shane's experienced with the clear resin.
You don't get that little dirt, like that really small, like dirt ring around the whatever you're putting it in when you're doing the finish between the clear glue and the epoxy from sanding. Like it tends to sometimes leave like it almost like it picks up some of the paper or something and leaves it like a really very hard to see border between the clear and the epoxy that you're putting that clear glue into.
You mean the clear CA
glue? Because I've tried that, and that's what I was getting, was that little ring. So I went back to epoxy because I'm thinking the bond is just so much tighter that nothing can get in there once that's cured.
Yeah, I've actually had that problem, and then I've had to take it back out a little bit. Or the other thing is, it disappeared after I polished it. It was there up until I started the polishing. So I haven't tried to actually pigment any of it, though.
But I have to ask, is Brooks getting micro bubbles with Moss LV? And then if so, is he pouring into like a pocket that, the wood's not taking any of the epoxy at all, like it's completely sealed? Because, I mean, I used to hate those things, those micro bubbles, and that's just a thing of the past with Moss. I don't have to think about them anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see if Brooks says something down below. If he's using Moss, he might be using something else still, and not switched up yet. Let's see this one. He got he's saying he got the 2.5-inch slab slayer. Looking forward to using it on his new CNC.
Hey, Patrick. Yep. That bit is just a monster. I just use it to do these boards here, the 4 that I have around me that are soaking in Odie's oil right now.
Let's see here. Greater than 10-to-1 by volume might be my limit. Not quite sure what you're talking about there, Brooks. Do you know what he's talking about there?
Let's see. The question before that, we asked him
about the question before that was no, something like
maybe he's meaning 10-to-1 with like pigment to the glue or something like that.
Well, he was talking about the 2 separate layers of color, remember?
Oh, okay.
So this one here is Mark is asking. It's kind of related to what we just talked about. You talked about using the making sure we don't discolor the wood, but you really didn't go into your how do you polish your final epoxy?
Yeah, so I start around 120 if it's an end grain board, 180 if it's a face grain board. Go over the whole board up to about 600, and then switch over. I try to take it up at least to 4,000, and that goes pretty quick. I mean, once you're at 6, you're at 8, you're at 1,000, you're at 2, you're at 4. You're right there. So you don't have to hit a 3,000 if you don't want to. You're just trying to get as much of that out of there. So when you switch to your polishing, because that's how I finish any of the stuff that's can't have a clear coat over it. Then I polish with those 3M products. The
Perfect.
Yeah,
I could put a link in here. The one that you sent me was the Perfect system, the 3M Perfect.
Yeah,
system.
yeah.
I'll put a link in here to those so people can have them. And of course, I don't know what I'm promising. I'll have to look at my video. I'm not taking good notes like Mark does. I'm going to write one down here. Perfect system.
Mark probably has all the notes for you. You just have to text him after this.
He's so slick at this stuff.
I know.
Let's move to this next one here. Oh, well, I did want to talk about this, Mark. So when I do the polishing, remember, I'm not the master. So what I've been doing since Shane got me into polishing certain projects is I normally will sand up to say about 800, maybe 1,000. Then I'll switch to water sanding, right? So I'll use the the wet sanding is what I wanted to say. Wet sanding up to about 2,000. I don't usually go much more than that. I have once or twice. And then I switch over to the 3M system.
Perfected.
Perfect system. So I'll wet sand up to about 1,500 to 2,000, and then I'll swap over. So do you use mica on organic components like skin, fur, and things like that, Shane? When you're trying to do skin colors or fur or something like that, do you use mica powders in those?
Oh, yeah. You were talking about like in the cartoons, like if they have like a fur on them? Oh, for sure. Yeah. Oh, wait. He says, do you not use mica?
Yeah. Do you not use mica on organic components like skin, fur, and things?
So sometimes I'll use it for like fur, especially like that one Rob has, that mahogany. I'm sure would look really good as like a bear fur or something like that. But it just depends if I need it to be flat or if I need it to be swirled. So sometimes for things like, well, for skin, I never have swirled it. So I should say I use zero. Sorry, Jim. I use zero mica powder in every flesh tone you've ever seen. I mean, I'm not looking to, do Twilight characters that sparkle. So there's none of that at all. No pigment whatsoever. Fur, yeah, I'll sometimes not if I want it to be flat, but sometimes I will because that can look, pretty cool. So it really just depends what else you're talking about. Usually like lips, I usually won't use mica powder in lips, skin tones. And then I try to alternate them sometimes too. Like if I have a hat on somebody that's really heavily swirled, the band is probably going to be, more flat. Or if I put mica in it, I won't stir it. I'll just let it kind of set and sparkle. I'll add that icicle to that because that puts a bunch of sparkles in it. And now we're back to the Twilight character, but you know what I mean.
So speaking about that, then let's open this one here. Here's an example. So you can see there that he's got some mica powders and stuff going on in there. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Shane.
but in the white and the gray, I didn't. And in the brown was actually, that was before I knew about eye candy. That was that Epoxy sandbar. Great color.
Yeah.
And eye candy has one that's that I use. It's great. I just can't remember the name of it. I think I still call it sandbar in my head, even though that's not the name they use.
So now, Shane, how do you go about deciding? People want to know, how do you go about deciding what you're going to want to swirl and what you're not going to want to swirl?
Well, I mean, swirl next to swirl to me looks kind of weird. I'm not saying I don't ever do it. There, you know, a lot of times the flames and stuff like that, I'll do it there because flames are supposed to be crazy. But to me, this would have looked funny if I did all that swirl in the sandbar, because that was the first pour. If you look at that video, that was just, I basically poured the whole head about, you know, just a millimeter in from the outside edge of the black line on the outside. I poured that whole thing sandbar, and then I started cutting everything into that. So to me, it would have looked kind of funny if I had the gray swirled into the brown and the white trying to swirl that white. And you got to remember too, this is I knew about swirling because, you know, by this time I was already doing some like, oh, that really bugs me that there was a flake of epoxy underneath his monocle, but it's not part of the, like I brushed it off after a few seconds and I left that in the video, I guess. But anyway, at that time, I mean, that was like at least 4 years ago. I wasn't nearly like as comfortable knowing what I know now. So looking back, I'm glad I did it that way because I was already swirling stuff and I just wanted to kind of keep them separated to where they just didn't kind of clash. And I don't even know that I could have swirled white that well back then, like I can now.
Okay. Let me see if I can get this. How do I remove? Here we go. So here's another example of what you were talking about, where I told you I felt like I really didn't do the job that I wanted to. And you and I talked through this one, going back to your swirl upon swirl. So if we look at this one here, folks, this is one that I did a few months back. It's a Martha's Vineyard one. And here's an example of what happens if you go swirl. I'll call it swirl crazy versus girl crazy. So you can see that I've got the swirl. This is the sandbar color here, by the way, which is a little gold added. And you can see how much swirl I have in the blue and how much swirl I have in the island. And so I've overpowered it. So the island really doesn't stand out like I'd like it to. So in this case, you either swirl the blue or you swirl the island, but not both of them. And if you were looking at this, Shane, can you remind us which one you would have swirled?
Oh, definitely the ocean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what you told me.
I probably would have just cut that into walnut and left the island like as walnut because it's just so beautiful. But that looks good. I mean, I thought that was walnut for a second. I didn't know what you were talking about for a few seconds until I looked into it.
Yeah, you can see that's a sandbar color is what I did with that.
Yeah, oh, that's sandbar. Yeah, that's a great color.
Okay, so let's see here.
Did you see the swirl video I sent you with the flames?
Yeah, so here's an example of what he does to try to swirl, because people ask about that all the time.
So how we leave it right here at the end, well, I'll let this finish and then I'll tell you. Yeah, so
So let me stop it right there so you can
Yeah.
talk.
So how you see this left is actually how I left it. And then if you watch the video that's on my page, probably, I don't know, 10 or 12 posts ago, the original one, you'll see it cured nothing like that. So you have to know that in advance to get the look you want. Like those colors during the process, the thermal process, the reaction that they're having, they're going to blend. They're not going to stay separate like that unless you decide to swirl really, really late, that's something I'll do if I want to, have it finished like that. I would just, I would probably put them in cups and go back every 15 minutes and just keep them in the cup and stir it in the cup. And I'd probably wait 30 to 40 minutes before I even poured them. And then I would do the swirl process once or twice, and it would start to probably set then. And you could keep that. But if you look at the final video, you'll see all that white or all that yellow down towards the bottom. It's gone. It just blended in and made a red.
So the other challenge, though, you got to be careful, right, Shane? The challenge I've had, if you swirl too long, pretty soon you're swirling in some semi-cured epoxy, and now you're creating bubbles and micro bubbles. So it really takes kind of a master's touch to figure out when it is you should quit messing with it. Because if you mess too long, you're carving it back out and repouring because you've got these bubbles in there.
The only thing I ever talk to Alexa about is when I say, Alexa, set a 15-minute timer. I say that the most, and sometimes 10, 8, 5, because I can tell I don't have much more time to stir this. I might need to be back in just 3 minutes. So I'll set a 3-minute timer, go back in. I'll take a corner and see if I can get something. And if I can, I give it one last one. And then you just kind of know you're done. You don't trying to stir it after it's supposed to be stirred that's a nightmare.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to bring out because people ask about that. And so you talked a little bit about it, but go back into it a little bit. So the challenge, folks, is how do you know when it's done? And a lot of it's experience, but there's a technique that Shane just talked about. And I want to make sure that you guys heard him talk about that. So when you're doing your timer at 15 minutes now, and for different epoxies, it's a different time. So for example, when I was using Upstart epoxy, I would be doing the swirling every 15 minutes for up to an hour and a half or 2 hours. I can't go that long with this Moss epoxy.
No, but that was a 1-to-1, right? Hour and a half?
Yeah. So this Moss epoxy, it's more like, for me, it's more like a half hour to 45 minutes. I can't go, if I go out past 45 minutes, I'm probably going to get into the gel state. So I'll call it a gel state because that's what that's what you're feeling for. And when you want to feel it, as Shane just talked about, you don't want to feel it up in the middle. You see where Shane's toothpick is? You're not going to put your toothpick in there and see if it's okay. You're going to put your toothpick in a different location, probably down here. You see the stuff on the side? I don't know if you can see the arrow, but if you go down on the left bottom side where it's overflowing and just on the edge there, you're going to barely, this is what I do, Shane, and tell me if you do something different. I barely touch that with a toothpick to see if it's sticky and if it looks like it's getting hard. And if it is, I don't get into that epoxy after that. Right. What about you?
Because the epoxy cures from the middle of the pour out. So if you're having trouble on the edges, you're going to have a nightmare in the middle. It's already way more cured in the center than it is on the edge. And that was it. That's how I left it. And then I wish I had a picture of it finished so I could show you the difference because it's a lot different. Like I would never want my flames to look just like that. There was just too much bright yellow in there. But after thousands of dollars of mistakes and trial and error, I've learned that'll go away. Those light colors just get burned right out during that thermal reaction that it has.
Yeah, here's another example. Another example of swirling in this one here. So Shane, there's an example of it didn't look like you did any pre-coat.
Well, there was no need. My profile around that project is further in than what the edge of the black epoxy was, so I didn't need to worry about bleed out. I was profiling that whole thing out. It was a dream come true project for this NBA guy, and at the end, like I sanded that thing to about 180, and then I just did some trisodium phosphate to clean it, let that dry, and then just dump clear over the top, and it just like a mirror. It's the best. That's like, I wish all my projects were like that.
So there's the overboard that he was doing right there.
Oh, I know what I did on that one. Sorry. So the black, I poured black huge out to past where my
Your cut was going to be.
My cut was going to be. And then gold, I also started, I didn't worry about the gold. I started out past the cut and then came into where it needed to be. And then knew that my 1/4 inch or my 1/8 inch end mill, whatever I cut with, would give me a nice line on the side.
Yeah, well, if you look at the side there, Shane, you can see you cut through the epoxy, so the gold epoxy was the edge.
Yep.
So then you poured that flood coat on there. Here's his epoxy god, Bill. So now flood coats is another question people ask about. Shane, how do you decide when you're going to use a flood coat, and what do you do for a flood coat?
I pray that the customer wants a piece of wall art, and then I just do a flood coat on it. Don't need to ask them because it just looks the best. But if it's going to be a cutting board or something like that where someone's going to be running a knife across it, even moving the logo to the lower corner is not going to help, because if the whole board has epoxy over the whole thing, that's a charcuterie board or a presentation board. You can't put a knife on it. So unfortunately, for some dumb reason, I started with cutting boards, but I wish I would have just started with wall art. I would have never went to having to deal with all the finish that I have to deal with. Like, it is just so much easier just to barely sand it to 180 and dump clear over it and heat it every 15 or 20 minutes and forget about it. And then you're done. You put it on its face after a couple of days. You sand across the back to get the not the bubbles, but the drips from the epoxy that you poured over the whole thing. And then you finish the back with Odie's oil, put a bracket on the back, and collect your however many $1,000 you got. And
well, the rest of us will probably collect about 125. You'll collect 1,000,
or whatever it is.
Yeah,
but it's easy money to collect.
So, but Shane, the other question I don't think you answered. If you did, I was probably reading the comments and not listening. What do you use to do the flood coat?
Oh, clear coat of clear epoxy.
The same Moss LV epoxy that you use for everything else?
No, sorry. So Moss has a tabletop epoxy, or also their art resin type of one. You can use that too. The only reason I don't use the that's a 1-to-1. They're gosh, I don't even know if it's a tabletop. I can go look. They sent me some.
They have tabletop and art.
They do. Okay, great. So yeah, so the tabletop is what I use for my flood coats, and it's a 1-to-1. So I'll usually let it sit for 3 days maybe, and then I will go put it on something really soft in the garage, face down, and sand off the drips on the back, then seal the back, and then put the bracket on, and then that thing is ready to ship.
All right. So here's one from Phantom CNC. What's the best way to get thin accent lines?
So the best way to get that, when he says accent lines, he could be talking about any of the small.
Let's see if there's any in here, but I think he's talking about the thin lines that you have around. Let's maybe over here. Let's try this one. Maybe it doesn't. No, maybe it doesn't have. Let's see this one. No, I was so. But when I think of thin accent lines, Phantom CNC, are you talking about like the lines that are around? Like if he had black lines around the beds or kitchen, or you know, when you're cartoon, sometimes Shane, you have accent lines, especially around Disney characters and other ones.
If that's the case, I pour the letter a full color, bigger, you know, like a 0.05 bigger or maybe even a little bit more, whatever you want. I'll pour a 0.05 bigger, and do that all black or all whatever color, and then come back into that and cut the letters I want to pour. That's how around any text you see that has like another color kind of surrounding it. That's how I always do that.
Let's see here. Do you have any tips on how to get good color transitions for times when you need one color to transition or fade into another?
Yeah, but I need to know which colors you're talking about, and I can tell you how to do it. But because sometimes you want to put a little something between them that's going to get eaten up when it goes into its thermal reaction, so you don't. If you just let yellow touch red, there's just not enough orange if you're trying to do that, and there's usually not that. The flame video will show you. Like I had to put a little bit of orange in between, and let me see. Yeah, I just kind of pour one in the top, one in the bottom, sometimes one in the middle, and just kind of let them touch. And then if you're doing that, don't be scared to give it a couple swirls across it. It's not going to stay that way. It's early on. If you do that early on, those swirls are going to go away, and it's going to set. So that might be a good thing to do. Just a little bit of stirring back and forth at where the colors touch, just to get a better blend. Otherwise, you get that fuzzy, blurry line.
Well, there's some blending or something you do in this one. Let's see if pull this one.
So here's what I was trying to say. I'll always pour the color that those two colors will make in between as a buffer, because otherwise you get like this gross, blurry, almost like stagnant color before you get that whatever color it made. So that's just kind of what I've figured out through the time. That probably doesn't make any sense. I wish I could explain it.
See, there's some fading of colors in the different shades of the face too. All right, and then let's see here. I know we're getting long here, so we'll just go another 5 or 10 minutes here. But there's one in here that Brooks says in Blacktail Studio Video. Remember he's the guy that does all the big river tables and stuff. Shane, he has bending epoxy with the sun. He bended colors. Any thoughts on that?
That sounds bitchin'. I think I remember seeing something from that guy. He was like an advanced dude, right?
Yeah, he's the guy essentially that showed that he had a $30,000 error because he.
Oh yeah, that guy's amazing. Yeah, that dude's a fucking stud. So yeah, my thoughts are on whatever that guy's doing. Follow that and do that. That guy is great. I mean, he wouldn't even know who the hell I was, so I can't talk any shit about that dude.
Well, he does a whole different style. He does.
I know, but the guy's like,
he's amazing
stuff. Totally amazing.
Yeah,
like he's what I consider like a real woodworker. I'm just some bald monkey that figured out some stupid shit, and I'm getting by. But no,
you do well. Don't put yourself down. You do good
when it comes to those guys that really know woodworking.
All right. Do you apply Odie's oil if you then put a flood coat over it?
No, I haven't flood coated over Odie's. I imagine you could, but I just don't think I would, just because I don't know if there'd be something between that the epoxy and the oil that would mess up the bond and make it look a little faded or blurry or something like that. but it might be fine. I don't want to say that it wouldn't work. It could be way better for all I know. I just haven't done that.
Okay.
I'll usually just either finish with a clear coat or finish with and even if I'm doing a clear coat over like something that's just a bunch of wood and I'm getting bubbles and stuff like that, I'll just sand that back down, do it again, sand it all down again, because each time the wood's taking more and more of that epoxy. So you're going to get your way in the end. You just have to be patient and be able to redo it.
Okay, so you just talked about a good point, Shane, and you and I talked about a project that I was doing before, and I think people are afraid of that. So people get afraid if they put a flood coat on and they mess it up, and they get all freaked out because, hey, I just messed this up, I just ruined my whole project. The key is, folks, you didn't ruin your project.
Let's have a thicker project and you spend some extra money.
Yeah, you spent some extra money and you have a thicker coat of epoxy on there, because what you're going to do is you're going to sand that back down. And what you start your grit with just depends. Probably the highest grit you can where you can get the imperfections out with, but it really doesn't matter, because when you pour the next flood coat, whatever scratches you have in there, the flood coat's going to cover it. So all you want to do is get that, whatever those imperfections on, whether they're bubbles, whether it's dust, whether it's ripple, whatever it is that's causing you the problems, you just have to sand it out enough to where you have a nice, flat, even coat all across the top. And if it went over the side, sand that out too. And then you just re-pour the flood coat again and start over.
But use TSP, trisodium phosphate, because what'll happen is this: like you could sand like 120 and pour a flood coat over it. You'll never see those scratches. That epoxy will just completely blend right in, and you'll never see those scratches. I usually sand to 180 if I'm giving it a flood coat, but you'll notice sometimes if you do these projects, if you notice like what looks like little small like clusters of bubbles, but so fine you can barely even tell. What that is like if you're just wiping the board off, that's that. What I believe it is, I'm probably wrong, but what I believe it is that dust that's in there, and the epoxy, goes and bonds, and it gets on that dust, and it's starting to come out, but it doesn't float to the top, and that's what's like leaves like these really fine micro bubbles if you don't clean it really good with TSP.
And that makes complete sense, Shane. You think you're trying to get it out, but you don't really get it out.
Right.
So back to Jim's question, he was talking about, let's say you're trying to do a transition color, say from blue to green. And then he was talking about, so do you make like a third color that represents the mixed color and pour that in the gap where they meet?
I do. It's easy to say, hey, blue and green make bluish green. So I pour some bluish green first in the middle, then I hit it, and then just run a little bit of stirring across each edge that where the blue met the blue green and where the green met the blue green.
Yeah, so I agree. So Brooks here is telling you you're full of crap again, Shane. That when you say you're not that good, because we all know that you're good.
The epoxy inlay part, I get it. Like that's great. But what I mean is like these guys that are like real woodworkers, I don't go, rattle their trees, because I know better. My grandfather was a master woodworker. I grew up around him, and these guys are just amazing. So when I see them doing stuff that there's no way I can do, or at least not without too much trial and error, I back away from those guys. Like the Wood Whisperer and all those guys. Those guys are mega talent. Anybody that can make a rocking chair out of walnut, that
you got your respect
about a guy like that.
All right. So Glenn here says, I think it refers back to the overcoating and stuff. You just got to make sure the Odie's is fully cured before you try doing anything on the top of that. And that's a good point.
Oh, good. See, so now I know I can do that. And I don't know, then I would feel like I'm wasting Odie's.
Yeah. Well, and the Odie's fully cured isn't 48 hours. I mean, for Odie's to fully cure, I think it's 2 weeks to 30 days. So,
yeah, that's what's always scared me, is not waiting long enough and having some weird thing happen. And at that point, you're at the end of your project. So I get really scared to have to start over from there.
So one last thing here, Mark is pointing out, just like you were talking about with the trisodium phosphate, it's really critical that you're cleaning your piece all of the time between.
But on
each
those,
of your
what I do on those, and this might not be right, but what I use for all those other transitions before what I was talking about on the inside is just like, some distilled water in a rag just to kind of wipe it off. And then I use my air compressor deal to kind of dry it. And then I hit it with the next grit.
Yeah, your point is
that's
you don't have to
key,
use
because otherwise you're going
trisodium
to have
phosphate.
spider swirls.
Yeah, your point is you don't have to use trisodium phosphate in between grits.
No, not there. I only do that inside if I'm going between flood coats.
Right. But you still clean it every time between the grits.
Or I also use trisodium phosphate, like if I'm doing a big table, like a cedar table or any kind of giant table, I clean all those pieces before I flood coat. Any river tables, any stuff like that, I always clean that stuff before I flood coat.
Now, I haven't used trisodium phosphate before, so maybe I'll need to switch or try that, Shane. I've typically used mineral spirits. What do you think about that?
That's probably great. I'm scared of them. I mean, I have them. I had to buy them out of state, but I have all the good stuff. I made sure to get, all the stuff I'm not allowed to have just because I feel like I should have that, even though I don't use it. So I'm sure they're great. I'm sure that maybe that works better, but I'm scared of those kind of things. I feel like I just don't know enough about that. There's guys like you probably, you can mix that stuff. Oh, I put a little bit of this thinner in with your stain or with whatever. I was like, I know I would mess that up. I'm not even going down that road. If I need something I have to add thinner to, I'm going to buy a product that's thinner.
All right. I don't see any more questions. I probably missed one or two in here. I think we've answered all the questions. We've been going almost an hour and a half. I just want to tell everybody thanks for the questions and having the open dialogue. I enjoy this kind of stuff.
Me too.
I plan on doing more live sessions, not all epoxy, but I knew that if I had one live session with Shane that we'd have to do epoxy. So I wanted to get that out. And so we'll have Shane on future live sessions and other live sessions where I'll try to do just a project or something maybe. But I appreciate you guys attending and all the good questions that you provided. And I really appreciate being Shane's friend for so many years now and living vicariously through his popular videos. He's got 65,000 followers and I have 600. So on Instagram, and there's a reason for that. I appreciate all that you've provided, Shane, and the insights. And I really appreciate, and this is what I want to emphasize to everybody, how open Shane is to questions. But Shane, like many of you, has a real job. Means he has to go to work every day, 8 to 10 hours a day, unlike me, who I get to play most of the time. And I like to rub it into him every once in a while. I'm on the golf course while you're working.
Today,
yeah. And so, but be patient with him if you ask questions, because he's got so many followers, he gets a lot of Instagram messages and stuff he has to deal with.
And the lady that helps me with my Instagram account a few weeks back, gosh, maybe about a month almost now, she had some things come up, so she's not able to get into those messages and kind of shoot me a text on someone I need to contact. So it's really screwed up now.
So just notice that know that he's not blowing you off. He's just may not have gotten around to seeing him in between his real job and all of the epoxy work he does at night.
Most of these guys probably have my cell anyway, so they would know to just text me. That's a way better way to get a hold of me.
You gave them your cell?
A lot of them, yeah. I think I'm talking to several of those guys via text.
Well, you never gave me your cell.
Yeah, right.
All right. Let's see if there's anything else. We got in the thing, we got thanks, Rob and Shane. And then we got thanks from Mark. So you can see them all here. A lot of people.
Very welcome. I'm sorry I'm not allowed to put any comments, but I appreciate you guys showing up.
I'm probably
I'm always willing to do these. I love doing these kind of things. So, Rob, we'll have to do one on my YouTube page, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever done anything from there.
Well, you don't do anything on your YouTube page.
No, I checked yesterday, though, and it's still alive.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
that's good. So when you're ready to do it, we'll do it. You just have
All
to
right,
find
guys.
time off from work.
Huh?
You just have to find time off from work and quit making boards at night.
I'm on a break right now. I got nothing on the machine. I'm just letting these soak. Well, that one soak, and then there's one there behind me. Just letting all that stuff soak in Odie's oil, and they'll get shipped out in a couple of days. All right, guys.
All right. Take care.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Bye.